brightness while it lasts is so beautiful and fast. You make it to the sky, but then you fall. Enjoy the wild night, enjoy the ride of your life, and be with it all. I sit here with you in the darkness where you grew, where all is uncertainty. What will this subtle ember be? It's the nature of the fire. Hold it too tight and it expires. It needs space to breathe, just like all our hopes and dreams. The brightness while it lasts is so beautiful and fast. You make it to the sky, but then you fall. Enjoy the wild night, enjoy the ride of your life, and be with it all. Be with it all. Little remember, you know, in the end, we let go. Oh, 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 oh. We let go. Oh, 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 oh. We let go. The brightness while it lasts is so beautiful and fast. You make it to the sky, but then you fall. Enjoy the wild night.
All right, hey everybody. Welcome to day 4. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me and if you can see me. I hope you enjoyed the intro song. That's one of my favorites from my lovely singer-songwriter wife. Thought I'd share that with everybody. So welcome. Hi, Jane. Let's see who else is here. Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, Donna. Hi, Kathy. Great to have you guys here. So we are going to get started. And oops, a couple of things that just did a little funny thing here. Okay. So welcome, and we have covered a lot of ground this week, and would love to hear from you in the comments. How are things going? What kind of takeaways have you had? What sort of shifts are you seeing? And what are you getting from this week? So we covered a ton yesterday in day 3. So just a reminder that the replays are available in the guide section or the featured post sections of the Facebook group. But here is a quick recap of day 3 in case you missed it, and it's also just a good refresher for anybody here. So we talked about anxiety-free success being possible when the anxiety ratio is less than 1. So your perceived threat goes down and your capacity to deal with those threats go up. And we also talked about why you might not feel so capable of pursuing what you want in your life or functioning in the way that you want in your life, and achieving what you want the way that you want to, which is presumably more pleasurable, more relaxing, and more enjoyable. And the reason behind that, we talked about it being a very fundamental disconnection from our essential power. It's like we're disconnected from essential capacity. So we looked at the different reasons why we might be disconnected from this and why we continue to disown and repress it. And finally, we looked at breaking the anxiety procrastination cycle and how that actually happens naturally when we realize our own capacity and our own power. Okay, so how many of you have felt a shift over the last few days? Hopefully, you have experienced something that's coming through that is helping you to either be with the anxiety, understand it a little bit more, and therefore create some more space. So it's a taste of what is possible when anxiety no longer rules your life. And I imagine, um, hopefully, you can imagine what it's like to have that level of control, clarity, and confidence. And I want you to know that it's actually possible to have that every single day in every moment. And that's what I want to share today is how to get from point A, which is maybe where you are now, to point B, which is much more confident. So let's just talk about this a little bit. And we've touched on this all week, as point A being where we started the week. Most of us start our journey with anxiety being overwhelmed by it to the point that we have avoided it, we've procrastinated, we have tried to perfect ourselves, we have tried to do all sorts of things to get out of this vicious anxiety cycle. And I know point A very well because I've been there and have seen it many times before with my clients. And it's a very familiar story. You can be very successful, you can be driven, and even very capable. And yet there is a constant nagging voice in the back of your mind. And it's one that makes you question your every move, doubt your every decision. Ultimately, it keeps you stuck in this loop of overthinking and procrastination and self-criticism. And if you're like me, you've probably tried a lot of different things, therapy, mindfulness, medications. And at least in my experience, while they helped, they might not have gotten you to where you actually want to be. And point B, obviously, being much more along the lines of a natural kind of self-confidence. And this is what we're going to be talking about in the next few days, where we are in touch with our innate confidence. We're self-assured. We have self-compassion and resilience. We know our self-worth, and that is not dependent on external validation. And when all of that is happening, we become more efficient. We feel a sense of personal fulfillment because we're more ourselves. So we end up having better mental health and physical health because anxiety isn't wreaking havoc on our nervous system. And when we listen to a bunch of talks like this and we know that we want to get from point A to point B in our minds, it might look like this, where it's like a nice casual stroll through the park and then we'll get there, right? Right? Or maybe if we've had a little bit more experience in personal development, we know that the path isn't so linear and maybe we'll hit a few bumps on the road or take a couple of detours. But really, it's more like this in my experience. And I'm curious if anybody's ever walked a labyrinth before. You might find them in churches and sometimes in schools. My daughter's school had one, and they're quite beautiful and they have a beautiful history. But the point of the labyrinth is that when you're walking on this path, and you're going toward the center of the path, but it actually is a journey where you kind of lose direction because it feels nonlinear and the path will take you back and forth. It might turn in unexpected places, and sometimes you feel like you're never going to get to that center. And that's actually where my job comes in as a coach and as a guide, is to help people stay on the path and stay in your experience, because a lot of times people will quit or they get off and you don't ever make it to the center because they thought they should be going in this straight linear A to B. Um, and actually, the labyrinth is a great symbol too, because that's actually what we are doing on this journey. We are getting back to ourselves in a real way and getting back to the center of who we really are. So today I want to share the pitfalls and the obstacles that might come across. And you can also think of these as secrets because they're not very well known. These are obstacles that you might come across that will either take you off track or make this journey to heal anxiety much, much longer than it needs to be. And just in case anyone thinks that I'm immune from these, I really wasn't. I learned these lessons personally because I spent 20 years actively figuring out and seeking on my own how to heal my anxiety, but I didn't have a guide at the time. I didn't have someone saying, okay, this is what you do in this situation and with this feeling, and this is something that you need to let go of, or this is something that you need to stay with. So there's a lot of these places in us where we do need help and support and validation and mirroring because we never got it in our life growing up. So, anxiety is really an inner experience. So, I had to learn how to traverse the inner landscape, and I made a lot of mistakes on the way. So, these are mistakes that I made that I wish someone had told me earlier, because I would have saved myself a lot of time. And actually, even if you have been on a healing path or on a personal development path, you've been going to therapy for a long time, these still come up. These are things that have a tendency to come up and we sort of fall into simply because we do not like to be in our experience, which we have talked about. Okay, so the most common mistake that we make is trying to get rid of anxiety, and we touched on that this week. And if you have listened to any of my other trainings, I always come back to this is we can't try to get rid of our anxiety. When we start there, we are already labeling anxiety as a bad thing and something to reject. And rejection prevents any sort of understanding at all. So just like you can't fix a car without looking under the hood, you cannot heal anxiety by ignoring it or pushing it away. So instead, the key is to change our orientation and start to accept it, embrace it, welcome it, like we talked about on Monday. And I thought it'd be nice to share a little story because it's so, for me, it's so powerful, a powerful example of what I'm talking about here. Somebody who lost his job, this was about 6 months ago. He was very overwhelmed with anxiety, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and was actually panicking. And he called for a consult. He had picked up my book and looked at it and wanted to just talk. And I asked him to just sit with the anxiety for a moment without trying to get rid of it. And he had been running around out of breath, kind of doing this or that, and he described the pressure in his chest and the fear that he was feeling. And just in that moment, very simply, I asked him, hey, what if you just hold the anxiety and pay attention to it without rejecting it? And literally within 2 minutes, he started to feel the anxiety relax. He started to feel, oh, okay, I can actually stay with this. So 6 months of panic that he had been experiencing began to dissolve just in that little brief exchange. And obviously, that's not something that in 3 minutes that we can heal anxiety altogether. But when we take that orientation where we are simply accepting what comes into our experience, it really shifts our experience. And so the takeaway is obviously when you stop rejecting anxiety and start embracing it, you start opening the door to real healing. Okay, so number two, this was a huge mistake that I made for like 15 years. We've probably heard this kind of advice, fake it till you make it, especially in dealing with anxiety. This approach kind of suggests that by acting as if you're confident and anxiety free, you'll eventually become that way. So it's very common in self-help and motivational circles. It can seem very appealing because it promises a really quick fix. And you don't have to look at anything, right? I'm gonna put on the persona of being confident and that'll just magically, then I'll become that. So while that might help you push through some discomfort temporarily, it doesn't lead to lasting healing from anxiety, especially. Why? Because it is built on the idea that who you are right now isn't good enough, that your current state of being is somehow flawed and needs to be changed or hidden away. But the truth is that anxiety is a part of you, and rejecting it only prevents true healing. And remember what we talked about yesterday is actually we need to go through the anxiety to reach and reconnect with essential power. So we cannot skip over that. This came up in our group coaching call today, where why is that? Is because essential power and our natural confidence and our beingness, our ability to show up and cope actually exists in the moment. And it exists in the moment, at least right now, for a lot of us, with all of the barriers that come with that also. So when we try to fake confidence or we pretend that our anxiety doesn't exist, we're actually pushing that part away. And it's very important for us to acknowledge that. So embracing anxiety means acknowledging it as part of your experience. So not something to be ashamed of or suppressed. It is about understanding that anxiety has its own wisdom and can be transformed into a source of strength. And obviously, that is difficult for some people who have identified as being very high achievers, having it all put together, having people perceive them as quite strong and confident and unruffled, let's say. But if you stop faking it and you start to accept where you are right now, anxiety and all, you start working with your anxiety instead of against it, you start opening really the door to genuine growth. Mistake number three, this was another one that was a prominent one for me, is to just let it go, right? Let it go, release anxiety. And the reason why this is a mistake is because similar to the first two mistakes that we looked at, anxiety, when you see it as something to be released, to not have in your system, that it's not useful or it's even harmful to you, we get into that trap of trying to get rid of it. So the truth is that what I found to be most effective is not to try to release anxiety. It is to be with anxiety. And you can try this today. You can try this tomorrow. Let me know how it goes. And sometimes the anxiety might expand a little bit, but if you can stay with that, it's like there's a ground that you have that you might not have been aware of before. So when we can be with anxiety, we can actually understand it. It feels heard, it feels seen. You start to move toward a more and more self-acceptance and more kind of holding and support for yourself and more capacity to heal. So we cannot really heal anxiety if you don't have a safe container for anxiety to heal. So if you are rejecting it, if you're trying to get it out of your system, even if it's something gentle sounding, like just let it go and release it, it doesn't really work. So mistake number four, creating a new version of yourself. This is a another common approach. Um, it's like what's the best way to describe this? It's like when you become the new you. You want to become the new you, the you 2.0, the bigger version of yourself, the New Year's resolution version of yourself that is confident, relaxed, isn't fazed by anything, right? So have you heard that before, tried to do that same sort of thing? Um, and what I always tell my clients and what I tell people who are interested in doing this work is that these patterns are so deep and they are so embedded in the psyche and in our physiology that we can't really just will ourselves to be different. It just won't happen. So the root causes of a lot of our anxiety, they're survival based. There are defense mechanisms around them. And unless you fully understand them and really process them, unless you bring support and compassion to them, they will remain no matter what you try to do. And so I know a lot of people, they don't want to do this work because it might seem too overwhelming to them, too painful for them, or it might hurt too much. But really, honestly, that hurt and that pain is happening all the time. The past is always present until we really understand it and work through it. So healing anxiety isn't ever about creating a newer, better version of yourself. It's really more about removing the barriers and dynamics that keep you from being you and from relaxing more and more into yourself. Okay, so this leads to another similar kind of mistake that I also made. So it's trying to change your subconscious. So hypnosis takes this approach, affirmations also, in some circles, prayer and visualization, manifestation techniques, that sort of thing. These do have some understanding that there are deep roots in anxiety that are operating in the subconscious. And I do think that you get results, and I did get results personally. But my experience with them is that they're limited in some way because they try to take you from point A to point B without really understanding the inner dynamics of what is happening, what is actually causing anxiety in the first place. So they don't almost have the language or the mechanism to say, hey, this is your inner critic, this is your inner child, this is the template that is being set up and continues to get activated. And so it's a little bit like trying to teleport from California to New York without having to take a plane or drive there or anything like that. So if you're doing affirmations, which I still love, by the way, but if you're doing that only and you're trying to get to the destination of being anxiety free, and maybe you have some sense of where you are and what blocks are in the way, but there is no GPS saying, no, you need to go right here, you need to go left there, you're going to hit a big city, so here's the route to go around that. And a lot of times, hypnosis and these sort of techniques can be oriented in that way. Like, let us install a new program in the subconscious, but it's less important to deal with the iceberg of stuff in the subconscious that creates and keeps the anxiety going. If it's a very simple sort of association that doesn't have deep roots in it, I think those methods actually really are helpful and do work. But what I have found is that real transformation actually happens when our conscious mind and our conscious awareness makes contact with our subconscious, not just from our conscious mind trying to change our subconscious patterns or plant something in there. I have not found that to be effective at all. Okay, so mistake number six, spiritual bypass slash mindfulness, right? So there's a whole host of things that fall into this, but I hesitated to include this because I obviously love and support spirituality, mindfulness, meditation. But the truth is that you could spend 1,000 hours meditating, feeling serene and anxiety free during those moments. But once you're back in your life, the triggers start flooding back in. So I used to experience blissful moments of meditation, being completely free and being completely at peace. And then when I got back to my desk and opened my email, it was like the whole constriction started to come in again. So that is where the concept of spiritual bypass comes in. And spiritual bypass occurs when we use spiritual practices like mindfulness to avoid dealing with deeper issues. So we might feel calm temporarily, but without actually addressing the underlying issues like self-criticism, fear, defense mechanisms. Those issues will remain intact, and you probably see in your life that they actually can resurface quite easily once they're triggered. So healing requires more than just mindfulness. It sort of requires a deep understanding, not just intellectual, but more of a profound spiritual understanding of what's actually happening. Okay, and the last one here, I put this in because it is so counterintuitive from our culture, because we hear all the time, especially in American culture, that keep your eye on the prize, something like that, right? Just keep your eye on the goal, ignore everything else. And this is actually a mistake when it comes to anxiety because we can get stuck in this constant pursuit of healing anxiety, and looking at all of the issues and what is causing this and what's this or that. And I want to do everything that I can to get across the finish line here. And what that does is actually prevent us from being with it. So it is like chasing shadows. The more that we run after the idea of anxiety, the further that we get from actually sitting with it and being with it. Okay, so I would love to hear if you're watching live or if you're on replay, which one of these mistakes have you made? I'm just very curious, right? Do you actually see them as a mistake? First of all, we don't have to take my word for it. But do you see it as a mistake? Were these helpful? What have you seen in your experience uh, potentially falling into one of these, let's say, traps? Okay. And while we do that, I want to share with you a little bit about my own journey because I do want to give you the roadmap that I didn't have because this doesn't need to take 20 years, even though I took 20 years plus to actually understand and work through this stuff. But without the right map, obviously this territory can be a bit hard to navigate because we're talking about perceptions, we're talking about history, past traumas, what's buried in our unconscious, and etc. So, this is actually what my path looked like. So, before I knew anything, I went in to get medication, SSRIs, antidepressants, all that sort of stuff. And then I got into law of attraction and all the things associated with that. Obviously, started a spiritual journey there and got into um, that sort of approach. And that led me to talk therapy, doing a lot of psychotherapy, interpersonal therapy. From there, really wanted to understand hypnosis, started to do visualizations, memory healings, and you know, in some circles, I was doing past life regression. So I said, oh, in my past life, I must have had something happen because I'm so anxious now. So, and then obviously getting into mindfulness, I am a certified mindfulness and emotional intelligence instructor. So this is where a lot of my training comes from is meditation, nonviolent communication, breath work, emotional intelligence training. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. So I read a lot of books and probably read too many books, got into cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, all that sort of thing. It was some of that was helpful. I took a lot of workshops and spent a lot of money on those workshops. And I joined a cult unintentionally. So that is a whole nother story. Feel free to message me about that if you want to connect on that. And in the meantime, I got burned out at work because I was still having a very activated and burned out nervous system. So there are obstacles that we run into. And yes, there are approaches and therapists and coaches and ministers and organizations that can be detrimental because you have to then undo concepts or you have to unlearn things that actually really aren't helpful for you or for your anxiety. So really what I'd love for you guys to have is a more direct path than I had. That doesn't mean that there aren't challenges or tough things to look through. It just means that you won't be spinning your wheels or making massive detours like I did. So that is actually what we have been doing. And I hope that you are finding value in each of the trainings that we've had because they build on each other. So I wanted to just look at this and kind of take the 10,000 foot view. So day one, we looked at the ins and outs of anxiety so that you have an accurate understanding of it and how it works in you. So you can think of that as a kind of compass. And we learned that this is the first step in our compass is am I the North Star, let's say, of your compass is am I staying with my experience? Am I accepting my anxiety? Am I welcoming it? And then day two, we looked at the step-by-step framework to dismantle the inner critic and therefore self-criticism. So this is like the tool that you need to use to clear out all of the self-criticism that causes so much of your anxiety. And I will say, I think I said this earlier this week, if you can clear out and master the self-criticism, understand where it comes from, see the history, and free yourself from its hooks, let's say, because it can feel like that. Anxiety will, 90% of your anxiety will be completely erased. So it's a huge step. And on day three, we looked at removing the most common limitations and barriers that keep us disconnected from a sense of essential power and capacity. It's a fundamental energy that we need to feel capable and confident and present. It's actually a part of who we are. I would even say that's a part of, in another way to say that, it's part of our spiritual nature to have this kind of power and strength to be able to meet the challenges that show up in our life. So I'm hoping that you will take this map and take all the information that I've given you and apply it in your life. So thumbs up if you're ready to do that. If it's not a thumbs up or heart, if it is fear, if it's anxiety, if it's um, anger, whatever it is totally fine. Remember, you will always hear me say this is come back to your experience and come back to the present moment. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in working with me, I'm just going to do a little pivot here. I'm going to spend some time talking about that now. And so I hope that by now you know that I'm not pushing anyone or forcing anyone through their own growth. I personally know how unhelpful and detrimental that ends up being because I've understood and lived anxiety for so long. Um, and I know what it's like to be kind of trapped in that cycle of high functioning anxiety, pushing yourself to excel, battling the self-doubt and fear on the inside. I know what it's like to feel like you're carrying a weight or a burden because it's not okay. It hasn't been okay to fully show up and to feel fully unleash this kind of power that you have inside. And I always used to hear that and I'd be like, that is not possible. But I want to really tell everybody who is listening, anybody who in the future is listening as well, that it is actually possible. And um, this is why I have devoted my career at this point to doing this, because I've developed this framework and this course to really help people dismantle and heal the components of anxiety. So this is something called the Anxiety Breakthrough Program. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is a course of 6 months where I work together with the participants and the enrollees in coaching sessions that can be fairly intensive, hands-on exercises, daily practices, group sessions, and all of that is designed to support you from getting to point A to point B, going from being constantly anxiety triggered to anxiety free, anxiety ratio being above one, anxiety ratio being below one. And the stages that we go through, you can just look at real quickly. So creating space from anxiety, disengaging from the inner critic, which is all things that we've talked about this week, understanding the sense of self that is actually identified with anxiety as being an anxious person, and challenging the core beliefs behind that and ultimately dissolving the anxiety template. So these are all things that we've touched on this week. The program that I run goes much, much deeper, and obviously you get a ton of support from me. For those of you who are interested, I'll talk about this in a little bit. I just wanted to spend 2 minutes sharing this testimonial from one of my current clients because I think it's really important to see for you to see that it is possible. And Victoria has a really interesting story because she came to me after she had a near-death experience. She actually was flatlined for a period of time and came back. And after she came back, she experienced a truckload of anxiety in her day-to-day life and was just trying to understand it. She hadn't done any of this kind of work before. So here she is talking a little bit about the experience working with her anxiety.
My experience with anxiety has been like a lot of tense, emotional, nervous, probably like not understanding why am I, even feeling this way. At times it kind of caused me to feel like I don't want to classify as like crazy. So sometimes it's made me feel that way with the repetitive thought over and over and over. I was doing some researching because I was like, there has to be an answer to why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. all the bios that I was reading, I didn't feel like a connection to them. When I got to yours, it was like a light came on. And I was just like, wow, like, okay, let me see, try to figure out how can I get in contact with him. Just reading your bio, like you just actually understood, you know. I mean, I know you went through, you know, but you understood like, okay, you're having these feelings because of this, or, you know, the things that you went through and the help that you was trying to seek after. And you just started just putting everything all together. And I was like, okay, if he can do it, I know I can do it. Of us being together and working through this,
Yeah.
it's been amazing. It has truly been a true spiritual journey for me. And I am so very honored and thankful that, you know, you took the time to just sit and just, you know, converse with me and just listen without judgment. And that's what I like. That's what I really like.
Oh, well, thanks so much, Victoria. Yeah, and you know, we've only been working together for a fairly short amount of time.
What
So,
about time?
yeah.
Okay, so I hope that was helpful because I always think that it's good to see others who are going through this process, one, so that you know that you're not alone, but two, also that you can do it. And I liked what Victoria said is if I can do it, you can do it. That's definitely, I know that to be true. So I just wanted to share a little bit about this new program that I am launching. There are some new components to it built on the foundational program that I have been running. But you can think of this as a container to go through all of these different components that we've talked about this week and do that with real love and compassion and support. So here is what it looks like. Hopefully you can read this. There are 6 months of group coaching sessions that happen on a weekly basis. We do a weekly guided meditation and live Q&A. In addition to that, you have 12 one-on-one sessions with me via Zoom. And every client that I have also receives this 12-week step-by-step digital course and a copy of my book, as well as additional Messenger and Facebook support. And then it also includes all of the workshop prizes from this week. So if you sign up, obviously you get all of this as well. Free month of group coaching, lifetime portal access, and the custom anxiety assessment. That's the 50-page kind of custom report that helps you understand all of the anxiety patterns at play in your life. So the investment there is 7,500 generally. And most programs like this will run 10,000 and up. And I know because I've taken them. And most of the time you don't get a choice in who's coaching you. So my cost is 7,500. You get me and my experience and not a newly minted trainee or anything like that. I'm dropping this to 5,300 for the people who are participating this week. And one of the things that I do is different payment plans as well. So you could pay 885 a month for 6 months, or we can arrange something else if that is something that works for you. And this is the big thing. I want to spend a little time on this because I'm very excited about it. Because you've already shown commitment by participating, if you're engaging, if you're showing up and you're interested in this, I'm offering an exclusive bonus for the first 2 people that sign up. And I've never done this bonus before. This bonus includes on-demand coaching. And I'm including this because what I noticed a lot of times with my clients and also my own experience is that people need support right away. We can't just wait a week or 2 weeks for the next individual session. That's all fine, but it's slower that way. And generally, I have my clients contact me through Messenger or email for support in between sessions. But because I want to really provide as much support as possible, I'm offering something called on-demand coaching. So if, let's say, you're prepping for a meeting and you start to feel anxious and you start to get to the point where you need, where you feel like you need support, you can call me. And if I'm able to pick up in that moment, I'm gonna pick up, and we'll go through a process to help you understand what's happening, even help you regulate your nervous system, do some breathing, understand the process so that you have real-time support. Or if I'm not available, we meet that day and at most within 24 hours. So I'm opening this up because both of my kids are now back in school for the first time since they've been alive. And I have a lot more space that's opened up in addition to my usual book of clients. So I really am looking forward to trying this method and this approach and this service out, because I do feel like it's going to accelerate your growth. And it also makes this a little different from your traditional coaching or therapist model, because we want to catch these things in the moment as they're happening and work with them and not have them kind of go stale after a few days or a few weeks. So if that is interesting to you, please take action. Again, let me know. This is the limited to the first 2 registrations and the first two enrollees. For those of you who this isn't feasible for financially, there are alternatives to be able to do the same kind of work. It might not be quite as intensive, but it will still work through the same thing. So there are individual coaching options. There are group coaching sessions available, both that have discounted rates available as well. And these provide flexible and cost-effective ways to get the support that you need. And so we have plenty of people who are in the group coaching session that are getting that kind of support. I have other one-on-one clients that do like a 4-pack or an 8-pack or something like that, and move along in their own pace. So reach out to me if you want to learn more about it. Again, this is the full anxiety breakthrough program if you're interested in doing sort of the full shebang. And again, limit 2 for the first 2 people who are signing up, this on-demand coaching offering, same-day sessions, and also an additional accountability program. So message me, comment here. We can set up some time just to chat and see if it's a good fit. I hope everyone knows by now that I don't do any hard sales tactics that you have to sign up that day or sign up, on the call. And I personally have always hated that sort of thing. So please don't expect that from me. I'm really just here to listen and see what the best option is for you and how I can support you and how you can take the next step to really heal your anxiety. So just a overview then, or a summary of what we have covered today, is all of the mistakes that I made in trying to heal anxiety. So just a quick refresher here so that we can digest some of this material. Mistake number 1, trying to get rid of anxiety. Mistake number 2, fake it till you make it. Mistake number 3, just let anxiety go magically and you'll be fine. Mistake number 4, creating a new version of yourself, the new and improved Timothy, the new and improved Kathy, the new and improved Donna, whoever it is. Mistake number 5, change your subconscious magically. It will just somehow shift your anxiety so you no longer have it. Mistake number 6, spiritually bypassing, trying to avoid all of the issues so that we can just enjoy the pleasure of being mindful or being spiritual or being in contact with God. All of that is great. All of that is great, but it can be a little one-dimensional and limited. And that certainly doesn't give us access to this essential power that we've been talking about, that we really need to be able to work through anxiety and the issues around it. And then mistake number 7, getting stuck on the goal and not actually being with your anxiety and accepting it and embracing it. So again, the mantra, let's say, if we want to use mantra, is to come back to yourself, welcome anxiety, be with it, embrace it. And from there, if you just follow that each moment, you will get to this place where anxiety is no longer having the same kind of hold on you. And if you need help with that, to help you stay where you are in each moment and to help you hold and support the anxiety. That's what I'm here for. If you have found value and that's all you want from this week is just a little information, that's great. That is what this group is for. If you need a little bit of extra support and want to connect with other people in the group, feel free to use the group and comment. If you have questions, use the group because it's really there for you. So I am really excited to get into tomorrow's session. We're going to talk about unlocking the hidden causes of anxiety. That's where we're going to go even a layer deeper. So we're going to give you some overview of that and why a lot of our past ends up being present in our life and creating more and more anxiety. Okay, so I'm just gonna close there. If you have questions, I'm gonna stick around for a couple of minutes. But let me know how this was for you. What mistakes did you see that kind of resonated for you that you've made or that you find yourself making? And also, what have you been getting out of this week? What is your next step in terms of healing anxiety, understanding this anxiety procrastination cycle, and what are you doing to avoid, let's say, to not continue to avoid what's happening in you. Okay, so I'll stick around. Otherwise, I'm going to end in another minute or so, and have a great rest of the day. If you're watching on replay, have a great evening, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.